So Bill Barnwell wrote about what the kryptonite of the Vikings is, and he wrote about the cornerbacks. But I think that might have changed on Sunday, that it still is the biggest problem that they have on this team, but it might not be as big of a problem if Xavier Rhodes is going to play 14 snaps a game, and now Mike Hughes is essentially the starting cornerback.
Well, the thing with Rhodes that I think is interesting, because we were out there yesterday to kind of recap things with Mike Zimmer, and he was asked about the injuries because somewhere in the first quarter of the game, Rhodes was behind the Gatorade cooler on the sideline, and I noticed it, and he was getting his right calf, because I had my binoculars and I was looking, and it didn't look like they were putting something on it. It looked like they were kind of massaging it out. And then he sustains the calf injury. So he goes into this game with an ankle injury, which made him questionable to begin with. And then he gets the calf injury. And at some point, I don't remember when, they announced it, I believe, either on TV. I don't think they officially announced it, but on TV, they announced he was questionable to return. He never did. 14 snaps is not a lot. That's like a Holton Hill workload. And Mike Zimmer was asked yesterday, hey, did the injuries have anything to do with his workload? He said, no, that was the plan going in. Okay, we're going to just limit your supposed number one corner, the guy that you've been pumping or fist on the table, like saying he's fine, it's just technique, it's this, that, it's fixable. And then all of a sudden, the plan going in is for Xavier Rhodes to play a sixth of defensive snaps. Are we seeing something here? I mean, he can save the Pats defense with his cornerback rotation. I believe that. But is Xavier Rhodes not being part of it? Is that going to be the plan going forward? Because it kind of looks like it if you're basing this off what Mike Zimmer said yesterday and what we saw from Rhodes, or what little we saw from Rhodes on Sunday.
So I think that this is what we're going to see for the rest of the year and into the playoffs.
I mean, I believe it.
A handful of snaps. Yeah. My question would be, should we give Mike Zimmer credit for making the change that needed to be changed? And also, isn't it fun? I've said this a million times, but I respect the fact that Zimmer struggles so much to lie. He could have easily lied to you guys and said, oh, yeah, just an injury, no big deal. He'll be back next week. And instead, you coaxed it out of him that, yeah, we basically have benched him or made him a rotational player.
That could also be him being cheeky, being like, yeah, we know Xavier gets hurt every single game. We were kind of preparing for that.
Yeah, that's true. But it looks more like Mike Hughes is going to get the majority of the snaps, and possibly Holton Hill will mix in as well. Something that we've been asking for about, 8 weeks now.
Longer than that.
Early in the season, it was very clear to us, the writing was on the wall, and to fans even watching at home, how often opponents were targeting Rhodes. But Zimmer believed that he could turn it around with, like you said, technique changes or schematic changes. And it seems he finally came to the realization, yeah, that's just not really going to happen. My guess is that what put him over the top is Rhodes getting hurt all the time, because I think that drives Zimmer crazy. And he's made cheeky comments about it before, but I think it drives him nuts when somebody is constantly unavailable. That's based on comments from the past about Shreve Floyd. I think it was, there was somebody else that he made a comment about. Just if you're not available.
Even Dalvin last year when it was like stop and go for
Chad Beebe.
6 weeks for the hamstring injury.
Chad Beebe was the other one who he was saying like, well, he's good, but he's staying healthy.
Yeah,
exactly. And so I think it's very important to him that guys are reliable. And if Rhodes isn't going to be because of his injuries, then he's going to put in Hughes more often. My question would be, do you criticize Mike Zimmer for doing this too late, or praise Mike Zimmer for doing what needed to be done and putting aside the stubbornness?
I think that big picture wise here, whether it happened week 8 or week 14 when they started, week 14 when they started rotating, beginning with the Lions game. To me, it had to happen. And coaches are stubborn. Coaches want to believe in their guys. They want to. I mean, he said it himself at owners' meetings. He has a big contract. He needs to play up to it. Can't fault Zimmer for giving him every chance to do that. I mean, this is somebody who he developed. Yes, Rhodes got here before Zimmer. But this is one of Zimmer's guys, and he has stood by him throughout all of the ups and downs of the last few years, has not thrown him under the bus, and still publicly hasn't. Maybe this is kind of his way of, lack of a better term, putting him out to pasture in a way, putting his career in Minnesota out to pasture, because now you think about it, we've talked about the cap hit next year and what all could be done there. I mean, this is kind of an indication that, okay, Xavier, we're going to do this kind of quietly and not just an embarrassing, like we're going to bench him the way that Josh Norman was benched earlier this year. Like, there's still a little bit of compassion here. I mean, he's gone from not shadowing guys to getting blown up in coverage to now seeing his playing time decrease to with all the injuries mixed in. It's kind of just this like slow, painful slide downward. But I think Zimmer's done some things with his back against the wall that he's believed have put this team in position to save the season. Last year it was firing John DeFilippo when that could have probably happened in week 10, week 11. Like when Zimmer wasn't happy about the run pass balance and ratio, he could have fired him earlier. He fired him week 15, said that I felt like I needed to do this to save the season. Did it end up saving the season? No. But he made a call. I mean, you can't fault him for that. I mean, he made the call as the head coach, which is his prerogative. He's entitled to do that. Was it too little, too late? Maybe. Is this going to be too little, too late? Maybe. But it had to happen. And I'd rather see somebody be proactive instead of, just kind of sitting by there and, digging your heels in that it's technique and fundamental. We're going to get him back to the way he was playing in 2017. No, you're not. Move on. Like, come to terms with reality, which I believe this team has. But when we're talking about Mike Hughes, I do want to spin it forward to that because I think the cornerback rotation was good. But if we're talking about Mike Hughes from the first half versus Mike Hughes from the second half, and if that second half performance did not exist because the Chargers were chargersing themselves out of this game, it's probably back at
Lionsing, Chargersing.
Probably back
everyone
at
knows exactly what you mean.
Square one with this because he did not play. Phillip Rivers targeted him on the same route 3 straight times in the first quarter. And he gave up that touchdown too. I mean, Mike Hughes struggled. And I think that this could also be a way of the Vikings saying, okay, if we really want to let Rhodes go next year, we need to know that Mike Hughes is going to be able to play as a starter's workload 16 games of the season and be just as good on the outside as Rhodes was during his best years.
And what's interesting is even though Hughes has been attacked on a regular basis, especially when he played against Dallas, when you look at his coverage grades from PFF, when he has gotten more opportunities here recently, they're decent. And his overall quarterback rating against is 95.8, which is way better than the 132 and second worst in the league from Xavier Rhodes. He's just performing, even though not perfect, like people came to expect from the number one corner when Rhodes was at his best. Hughes has been solid. And that's all you need to be, I think, a good defense. That if you think that the Vikings are going to be a great defense all the way through the playoffs and not have somebody throw for 275 yards or 300 against them, sorry, that's probably going to happen. But if you can be average at this position and not dead last in the NFL, that's a huge gain that you have just made here by just proxy of being average. I think it's as big or bigger of a gain when you go from terrible to average than it is from terrible to great. Or it's the same. It's the same type of upgrade.
It looks the same, at least on paper, because anything's better than what you had at your worst, right?
Exactly.
That's how I would view it. I mean, and it did look better. I mean, you saw what happened there with, I think, Anthony Harris looked really good on Sunday. Mike Hughes looked better towards the end of the game. Harrison Smith has looked great all season. I mean, I know that some people are going to say he's a step slower than he was, but whatever. That's age.
Still a great player.
Still a damn good player. To see kind of at least a glimpse of hope within the secondary that, hey, they can fix it. Because I read Barnwell's article, and he's right. The team you don't want to face is a team that can throw a really good deep ball, and that's Seattle, which they already went through that and went through the Xavier Rhodes horror show in week 12. So I get it. I totally understand the need to do it right now, and you just kind of honestly hope that it's sustainable.
I'm glad that you tied that back in. I think that the team you don't want to face is the team with the best defensive line, and that is probably the San Francisco 49ers. Because if you go through the schedule here for the Vikings, early on in the season, they really faced some game wreckers, and guess what they did? They wrecked the game. I was just pulling this up because I thought I was remembering this wrong, but I wasn't. That the Packers pressured Kirk Cousins on twice as many dropbacks as he had clean in week 2.
Well, and they also sniffed out the play action. I mean, they had guys waiting on the edge.
Exactly. And
which
so they
was
had
hilarious because like 2 weeks later, 3 weeks later, Philly could not figure that out to save their life because apparently they don't watch tape from the Green Bay game.
Yeah, and Philly has a good defensive line,
and they have
too.
a good defense. Yeah, that's my thought.
But they seem to have a defensive coordinator that the Vikings can shred because they've done that twice with Kirk Cousins. But when it comes to the San Francisco 49ers, I think they have, if not the best defensive line in the league, top 3 defensive lines in the league. They have a very smart defensive coordinator and just game wreckers up there, Nick Bosa being the top one. And you might be able to take away one good player. Like the Chargers, for example, they have Ingram and they have Bosa, and the Vikings did a pretty darn good job of taking those guys out of the game. But when you have interior guys too who can crush, that's where the big issue is for the Vikings. That's where you're not going to get the same type of performance out of Kirk Cousins. And we saw that in Kansas City. When they started putting Chris Jones all over the place on the front line, he was getting back there almost every single snap. And all of a sudden, Kirk Cousins is throwing off of his back foot more often because he doesn't escape the pocket. He doesn't roll out. He doesn't step up. He stays in one spot. And that's when you get your strip sacks. And even Denver in the first half found ways to get after him like that. And they don't even have a great pass rush. So that's the one that I would say has the biggest kryptonite for the Vikings, because if this team cannot produce a great offensive performance in the playoffs, I think they're going to be out because the defense is no longer